Congressman Jody Hice of Georgia is joining us now on the Scott Sands Show. Congressman, always great to have you on the air.
Always great to be with you, Scott. Thanks.
You know, we're keeping an eye on the Derek Chauvin case in Minneapolis. I'm not going to play all of the audio right now because it's rather lengthy, but one of your House colleagues, Maxine Waters, who represents California, was in Minneapolis over the weekend, and then some of her statements seems to be inciting more violence in Minneapolis.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's what she was doing. And, you know, what are we supposed to do with this? She came after many of us for standing up for fair elections, calling for us to be expelled from Congress for inciting riots on January 6th and so forth. She led the way in having Marjorie Taylor Greene lose her committees and all this sort of stuff for things that she said years ago before ever even being a member of Congress. And here she herself is leading the way in calling for people to be more controversial. And these are people who are already engaging in riots. They're engaged in riotous activity, and she calls on them to be more confrontational. And, of course, a couple of National Guardsmen were shot within hours of her making these statements. It's just mind-boggling, and I can tell you there's a significant and a growing movement here in Congress to confront her over this and for there to be some degree of hopefully severe consequences for her herself inciting more riot and violent behavior.
Is there anything, Congressman, that could actually be done? I mean, you're the party in minority in the House. Do you have any allies with the Democrats that also feel the same way, that would join Republicans in censuring or taking other action against Maxine Waters?
Well, you know, we're going to find out. Of course, we're just flying in today. This is a fly-in day, so we've not had opportunity yet to see all our colleagues and to take a feel of the water and see how warm it is. But I would just think it would be very difficult for some Democrats, at least, not to come out speaking against her on these type of irresponsible comments that she's made. So, but, you know, I don't know at the end of the day right now what we're going to find, but the temperature, I would think, is going to, at least with some Democrats, be very, very much alive in terms of them understanding they cannot give her a pass on making these comments after they have been so strongly opposed to much less comments that have been made by Republicans.
You know, I have not seen any reaction from Speaker Pelosi yet, although she's the leader of the party in the House. She's also there to represent the entire House, the people's House. And for her to remain quiet on this, I think speaks volumes to where she and the party stands. I've reached out to Marcy Kaptur's office to find out if local Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur agrees with Maxine Waters. No comment from Congresswoman Kaptur's office yet. I think that's very telling.
Yeah, I do too, and we are going to see. I mean, America is about to see what kind of person Speaker Pelosi and other Democrats are. They have been so outspoken, unfairly outspoken against Republicans, against President Trump, for making comments of much less significance than what Maxine Waters. And you'll remember a couple of years ago, it was Maxine Waters that went out publicly attacking members of the president's cabinet in a restaurant, where she basically said, if you see the cabinet members anywhere in a restaurant, department stores, gas stations, or anything like that, you push back on them and tell them that they're not wanted, that they're not welcome anywhere. This is the same Maxine Waters making those comments a couple of years ago, now making comments that unquestionably, in my opinion, are absolutely inciting riotous behavior.
Urging the people of a state other than the one she represents to violate curfew orders, unless, of course, it involves COVID-19. Then those curfew hours you should absolutely abide by. You should definitely follow COVID curfew, but just not a curfew put into place because of violence on the streets.
Yeah, well, we all know, obviously, COVID does not apply to rioters. Right. It just bypasses them. So if you're rioting, then you're safe from COVID, obviously, at least in Maxine Waters' mindset.
I'm sure all rioters have been fully vaccinated. It makes there's so much about all of this that doesn't make sense at all. But it's frightening to watch the speed and agility at which the Democrat Party has moved to essentially break apart every institution that we hold dear from the U.S. Constitution in really 100 days of President Biden in office. And now, I mean, you're looking at the attack on voting with H.R. 1. You're looking at the possibility of statehood for the District of Columbia, which would change forever the Electoral College, not to mention what might happen with Puerto Rico statehood. And look, I'm all for adequate representation for people who are taxed by the United States. That's, how our country was founded. But the Constitution specifically prevents the District of Columbia from becoming a state.
Well, that's exactly right. And our founders, for very specific reasons, set it up that way. In fact, Scott, they did not want foreign interference. And that term is there. They did not want foreign interference in our elections. They did not want ambassadors and individuals from other countries coming here and through bribery or whatever other means they may have to influence elections if those elections are headquartered, if you will, out of Washington, out of our capital. And so our founders, in order to avoid that, they said the best way we can avoid foreign interference is to spread the elections out and let the states handle it. And that way it's much more difficult for there to be widespread national fraud coming out of the seed of our country, our capital. And now H.R. 1 is an attempt to reverse all of that and to bring elections right back under federal control, and what's even worse than that is the contents of H.R. 1 really codifies all the horrible things that took place in our country this past year with the election, with universal mail-in ballots, for example, no voter ID, these type of things, ballot harvesting, all of these things are codified in the H.R. 1 legislation. It's just an absolutely horrible piece of legislation, period, let alone to require nationally elections to be handled in this type of irresponsible way, overriding the governance and the authority that states have. It's just absolutely horrible. But, yeah, the rapid nature in which the Democrats are taking our country downhill right now is extremely frightening. It's one of the biggest fears that I hear from people all around, not only the state of Georgia, but other places as well.
We're talking with Congressman Jody Hice, who represents Georgia's 10th here on the Scott Sands Show. You can follow him on Twitter at Congressman Hice. We've talked about what happened in the Georgia elections a lot over the last few months. Georgia at least had the common sense in the last few weeks to reverse and to legislate the prevention of many of those things from happening again, which obviously led to the boycott of the All-Star Game by Major League Baseball, which is devastating to the economy for the people in the Atlanta area, and shows a lot of hypocrisy on the part of Democrats and what they hope to accomplish with H.R. 1.
Yeah, and yet it's really a good piece of legislation. The only thing that it restricts, Scott, is cheating. And that's the intent. And yet the liberal left, the radical left, many corporations and so forth are running on this false narrative that somehow the bill that the Georgia legislature passed is going to restrict and suppress elections and access to ballot boxes. It does absolutely nothing of the sort. I had a huge conversation with leaders of a major corporation in the Atlanta area over this bill, and they were one of them that had come out speaking against it. And I just simply asked them, name me one way that this restricts votes. And I'm telling you, they were incapable of naming one way in which the bill in any shape, form, or fashion restricts anyone from voting because it doesn't exist. All it does is help restrict cheating. And unfortunately, we have many on the left that don't want cheating to be restricted, and so as a result, they attack the entire bill as some sort of restriction against voting access, which it has nothing to do with that in any way.
So what can Republicans in the House do? What can Republicans in Congress do to slow down this path we're on, apparently, especially if with the talk right now of abolishing the filibuster rule in the Senate and talk of packing the courts? I mean, the list is quite long and dangerous right now, and yet the president and the Democrats are failing to address some of the biggest crises of the day, including the crisis at the border. Obviously, we don't have time, Congressman, to get into all of these problems that are happening, but what can you do? How can you pump the brakes a little bit in Washington, I guess is my question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a question that we, particularly us members of the Freedom Caucus, we kick around constantly trying to figure out ways and things that we can do. One of the things that I can tell you that we are absolutely doing is that there is not a moment that we are in session in the floor that we do not have a member of the Freedom Caucus there objecting to unanimous consent votes. We are calling for roll call votes on everything, which is majorly gumming up the works, slowing down the works, and forcing both Democrats and Republicans to vote on every single bill that they are putting on the floor. And we have had more than 20 bills that the Democrats have actually pulled from being voted on because of such. They themselves don't want to vote on some of these bills. They're horrible. And so instead of voting on them, they want them to just pass by voice. So all the yeas say aye and the noes no, and the opinion of the chair is the aye have it, and it's done without any recorded vote whatsoever. And so we're saying, no. We request a recorded vote. And as a result, we have had, I think, in the ballpark of about 25 different bills that ended up not even being voted on because not even Democrats wanted to vote on them. So, that's one thing that we are trying to do. We're utilizing every parliamentary tool that we have available to, as the majority, to try to slow things down, to try to gum it up. And we're seeing some success. But listen, we need the American people calling. We need people calling their representatives, calling their senators, doing everything, lighting it up on the switchboards so that, people around here listen to their constituents, and we really need the service, the power of American citizens to get engaged in this whole thing.
Yeah, hold everybody in Washington accountable for their votes, for their actions. Congressman Jody Hice here on the Scott Sands Show. You're one of the good guys. Thanks for doing what you do in D.C., and thanks as always for your time on the show.
Thank you, Scott. Always great to be with you.
Follow him on Twitter at Congressman Hice.